Greetings, fellow conquerors, this is Darkfire Slide, and welcome to a video where I am going to attempt to explain why quantity ideas is considered to be better than quality. And, I had a lot of people asking about this, how could you pick quantity over quality? Quality is obviously better, some people have even, basically calling my opinion, stupid on that. And I'm going to attempt to explain in this video why I consider it better, and also why the general consensus among the community is that it is better. So, let's give this a shot, shall we? Okay, so the idea that I want to start with the idea that quality is better. So quality, a lot of people say quality is better because of the combat ability helps your troops do more damage. The artillery combat is especially nice in the late game. You get 5% discipline, which is really nice, and you get yearly army tradition +1, which is also quite good for helping to maintain that your, army tradition isn't going to get too low, which is nice. It also raises your land morale and a couple of other things if we look at army tradition real quick. So it'll increase your, it'll also increase your manpower recovery speed and army morale recovery speed, as well as give you a little bit of siege ability. Of course, the problem with only +1 yearly army tradition is that by itself it's not really that great, because 20 army tradition, you get about a resting point of about 17 or 18 if you don't fight any wars with this, which really is not that great. It's not nearly as good as getting a guaranteed general pip on your troops in each category from offensive, for example. It is still good, don't get me wrong, but it's not like it's this be-all, end-all amazing thing. And honestly, army tradition is kind of one of the better things about this idea group, if I'm being honest. And then, of course, the other main thing that people bring up when they talk about quality is, first of all, that quality and economic gives you discipline, 5%, which is nice, and that quality and religious gives you 10% morale of armies. Fair enough. It's pretty good. Bear in mind that these are policies, by the way. So when you enact these, you are taking a point penalty, usually in military. And of course, the one that everybody loves to mention and bring up is the, modern firearm techniques from innovative ideas. And now it's a good policy. 20% infantry combat is pretty big. It's about as good as 10% army morale, or 10%, or about as good as 7% discipline, 7.5% discipline. So it is pretty good. There's, it's hard to argue that that 20% is pretty good. And yeah, I would agree that that policy does make it a good idea group if you take the policy. And but it's important to note that, first of all, you have to take innovative to get this. And innovative is an okay group. I would hesitate to call it a great group. A lot of people point to the better tech costs. Really, to me, the best parts of innovative are the prestige decay, which is nice. It's not fantastic, but it is nice. And the monthly war exhaustion down are probably the two main things. The leader without upkeep is good. Advisor cost down is really good. Possible advisors is nice as well. And mercenary maintenance down is also the thing about innovative is a lot of it is nice, except with maybe the exception of reduced inflation costs. Whatever, who cares? But the rest of it is nice, but none of it is game changing. None of it is gonna nothing about it is anything to write home about, in my opinion. So to get that policy, you have to take quality and you have to take innovative. So you have to sacrifice. You have to take innovative and thus not take religious, not take economic, not take expansion if you're wanting to expand overseas, not take administrative, and get that amazingly good core creation cost reduction, and of course not take humanist, which is going to stop rebels from popping. Now you could always take innovative later, it's true, but at the late point in the game, I don't know, it's debatable in its usefulness at that point in the game. Like a lot of idea groups, the earlier you take it, the better it is. The idea cost reduction from humanist ideas, or even the tech cost from innovative itself, is going to save you a decent amount of points, but the point reduction from administrative is going to be probably the most, just because of how much you generally core when you play EU4. So by taking innovative, the point is, by taking innovative, you're going to be sacrificing one of these groups early on if you take it as your first group, and if you don't take it as your first group, then you're probably not going to have your modern firearm techniques for, you know, any point in the game. The other thing a lot of people like to bring up when they talk about quality ideas, they go, oh, well, I played as Prussia, and Prussia is awesome, and with quality ideas, it just broke the game. And the fact of the matter is, Prussia's national ideas alone are better than what a lot of nations can achieve without, you know, with all military ideas, basically. So using Prussia as an example of, like, yeah, I built this really good military because I played as Prussia, it doesn't really hold any water with me, because Prussia's military is already good. You could not take any military ideas, and the Prussian military would still be better than most enemies that you fight, just because their national ideas are so good. And so yeah, that's kind of my point on that, is like, it's like, okay, you know, or Sweden for that matter, getting that you know, additional infantry combat ability. You know, it's like, it's already there, and, you know, yeah, if you improve upon it, like, your troops are ridiculous, but they were ridiculous in the first place. So, you know, they're the exception and not the rule, is kind of the point I'm making here. Now that we've gotten, so this is kind of like the quality argument, I want to say, is that, you know, you get these really amazing troops as long as you take innovative and economic ideas. Arguably, two of the weaker administrative idea groups, if I'm being 100% honest, though a lot of people like to back economic as well. They're like, it's so crazy good, and I'm not really convinced. So anyway, let's move on to quantity. So, we understand that quality, you know, quality does make your troops better. It will improve the quality of your troops. It does make them fight better unit per unit. So here's what we get out of quantity. So for quantity, for the first two ideas, first of all, you get 50% more national manpower. And this is really important because it increases the maximum amount of manpower. So if we were to get this right now as Muscovy, we would go from 29,000 to about 44,000 manpower. And it's important to note that, let's see, we're not exactly at 10% recovery rate, I don't think. But it's important to note that the recovery rate of, you know, ideas, of your manpower is going to be based on your maximum. And so that's the more manpower you have, the higher of a recovery rate you're going to have. And then you add that on top of having the second idea, which is 20% faster recovery speed, and you have an army which is not only, you know, like, massive in terms of manpower, but also your recovery speed is going to be much higher as well. And the reason that this is so important is if you're constantly fighting wars, you know, that you're going to be running out of manpower. Just even if you don't fight any battles, you're still going to be losing manpower from sieges. And the problem is, like, manpower, it does not regard, like, you know, it doesn't care how good your troops are. Sieges are still going to lose you troops. And the only thing, I don't think there's anything in quality that actually reduces the amount of attrition you take. So the thing about quantity is these first two ideas are just huge. These first two give you so much manpower and so much manpower recovery that, like, it's almost not an issue for the entire game. Which means, in turn, that you can field cheaper, you know, troops, and you don't have to buy mercenaries. And the fewer mercenaries you have to buy, the more money you're going to save, because your primary expense in the entire game is almost always going to be army maintenance. And conveniently, quantity also reduces the cost of all regiments and land maintenance modifier. Now, let me explain this. So, what are regiment costs? Okay, regiment cost is, first of all, the recruiting price, but also consider that unit maintenance is based on overall cost. So by reducing the, like, initial cost of a unit, you also reduce the maintenance. So by going from, for example, Muscovy starts out with a 20% infantry cost reduction. So instead of being at like 0.21 or 0.2, what the cost would normally be for maintenance, these Bardiche infantry are now only going to cost 0.16 per month. And so yeah, 10% is going to, make it so you can field more troops. They're cheaper to recruit, and they're going to have less maintenance. And this applies to mercenaries as well. So even if you run out of manpower, which is going to be difficult in the first place because you already have so much, then you get reduced regiment costs, and then after that you get an additional land maintenance reduction. Now after that we have available mercenaries, which doesn't really matter. It's not really that relevant. Garrison size is annoying because it makes makes your enemy have to use more troops to have to take down forts. I think it works that way anyway. It also makes it harder to assault, but that doesn't really matter that much either. It doesn't come up. And lastly, you get land attrition minus 10%. So, on top of more manpower and cheaper troops, you also take reduced attrition, meaning that you're spending less money reinforcing, you're spending less manpower reinforcing. And then the last part of this, of quantity, is that you get land force limit plus 50%. And a lot of people have said, like, oh, well, I can never afford to build up to my force limit anyway. Well, you may not be able to build up to that 50% all the time. You could, and that means that you're not going to be spending as much money. And you actually have the manpower to build this with actual troops, is the other part of it. Because you already have that from quantity, from the earlier part of quantity. And, even if you can't build up to that, you're getting basically a 20% reduction in the price of your troops. And that means you're going to be able to afford, a lot more men than you would otherwise. So even if it's not exactly a 50% numerical advantage against an even opponent, it probably will be closer to the range of 20 to 30% on average, just based on an equal economy. Now, if you combine it with other idea groups, like defensive ideas, for example, you get even cheaper land maintenance. And let's look at some of the policies of quantity as well. So let's see, where's some of the good ones? All right, so a good one is with diplomatic ideas, you can get 10% land force limit, but also diplomatic reputation +1, which is quite good for getting alliances, if you would not otherwise be able to get them. If you take administrative, which is a great idea group in the first place, you get manpower recovery speed +10%, so 30% total, just from ideas and the policy, as well as land maintenance modifier -10%. So again, cheaper troops. With that policy, you could potentially buy more troops. And as well, if you see religious ideas, not only with religious ideas, not only do you get morale of armies +10% like you would with quality, but you also get recover army morale speed. So it's just a little bit better. And lastly, with economic ideas, with quantity and economic, you get development cost -10% and land force limit +10%. So just a lot of really good ideas in here. A lot of really good policies, I feel. It's not quite infantry combat +10%. Oh, one I didn't even mention. I'm getting ahead of myself. With humanist, which is a really good, one of the, in my opinion, the best administrative idea group, you get land leader shock +1. So you get better generals, and if you take offensive, that's 2 guaranteed shock pips, which in the early game is devastating, if you so decide to do that. So yeah, that's kind of my take on quantity. Now, the last argument a lot of people make is that, oh, well, in the late game, combat width gets so high, or so, yeah, it gets, you start filling out the combat width when, you're fighting, and so the extra troops just don't mean anything. And I think that comes down to just a general tactical ineptitude of the people in question. There is the way you use bigger armies. Most people just throw all their troops into a single stack and throw them at each other, and that's not how you use a bigger army. If you have, for example, say you have 3 armies that slightly exceed the the combat width. So say combat width is 29 and you've got 3 stacks of 60, for example, because you have quantity and you have 180,000 troops. what you do is not throw all of those troops in at once. What you do is you start fighting with the 60,000. Once they start getting whittled down, then you throw in another 60 stack. And that 60 stack is going to be fresh, and it's going to have plenty of morale and plenty of troops left. So that stack reinforces. And when that one starts to get whittled down, then you throw in the next stack. And you just assault them with this wave, constant wave of reinforcements of fresh troops into the battle. And that's why a lot of people get frustrated with the combat in this game is because reinforcing like that is the way you should be playing. Because only so many troops can fight at a time. And in a combat that's like large, no matter if a unit is fighting in a combat or not, they are still going to be taking morale damage. So even your reserve troops are going to be taking morale damage. So if you wait to reinforce, those troops are not taking morale damage. When they enter the battle, they will refresh your unit morale overall. Now, you're against a quality opponent, you're probably going to take more casualties, but that doesn't really matter. Because it's likely that, as a quantity player, you will have fought more wars, taken more land, and thus be even bigger than somebody who took quality. So that's kind of my idea on that is, and that's kind of the community consensus as well on like the forums and stuff is, this is why quantity is better. It's not, like, obviously quality troops especially with, like, modern firearm techniques, these troops are going to be better. It's true. But with quantity, you're going to have much more, many, many more troops, as well as just a more resilient nation able to deal with more problems and not have to worry so much about manpower. And your economy is going to be a lot healthier as well than somebody who has taken quality, because even though you have fewer troops in quality, you're still paying full price for them. And if your manpower runs out, you're going to have to rely on mercs, which doesn't happen as much in using a quality group. So, bearing all that in mind, I hope I made a strong case for quantity ideas here. The reason that it's better is not because your troops are better or that having more troops is necessarily better, but rather that you get cheaper troops, which helps your economy monumentally, and as well as getting more manpower and more manpower recovery speed, as well as reduced attrition, which is always nice. And just to clarify, it also stacks with defensive in reducing attrition and reducing maintenance. So if you want the cheapest troops possible, go for quantity, and they'll have good morale too, because defensive also gives you the army tradition and morale of armies. So, let's see, was there anything else I wanted to add? Oh yes, there is a logic in the AI, if you care about this sort of thing, where the AI bases your threat level, like how dangerous you are, on how many troops you can field. How many you actually have, and then versus how many you can actually field. So the higher your force limit, the less likely an AI is to attack you, because it, mostly calculates the number of troops when it worries about whether or not it can defeat you. So that's another thing to consider with quantity ideas. But anyway, I've rambled for about 18 minutes now. I hope I made my point about quantity and why it's, air quotes, better than quality. Like, my conclusion is that quality, yeah, it makes your troops better. It does. I'm not denying that. And modern firearm techniques is good. But with quantity, you don't have to sacrifice humanist and administrative or religious. And it actually stacks really well with economic as well, if you like to take economic. And the last point I want to make is, you don't ever have to just take one military idea group. By the end game, you often have 3, if not 4, military idea groups. And so, by the late game, a lot of these points are generally moot. But in my opinion, quantity is perhaps the best early game idea group to take, just because you get so much manpower and you save so much money by having to not recruit mercs. So anyway, I hope I made my point. You may still not agree. You may still prefer to take quality, and honestly, that's fine because yeah, it works. I've seen it work. But in general, I feel like the bonuses afforded by quantity are, generally speaking, more useful over a larger number of purposes than quality. So anyway, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you agree or disagree, or if you want to add anything to either of my arguments. I tried to be as inclusive as I could, but I didn't want to make this video too long. But without further ado, God be with you in your conquests.